Basically, here we go, guys. We're starting into section 16.1, which is dealing with thermochemistry. Now, there's a lot of information in this first section, 16.1, right? And so if you notice, there's only 2 sections in this chapter. I would really encourage you to maybe look through carefully 16.1, read through carefully. And then I've tried to put up a bunch of Edpuzzle videos and things that I think should be helpful for you for these concepts. But I'm saying again, it's pretty dense. There's a lot of material that we cover in chapter 16.1. So here's our objectives for this section. We want to make sure we can define temperature and determine what units temperature should be measured in. We should be able to define heat and, again, state its units. We should be able to perform specific heat calculations. That means you're going to start using the equation Q equals mc delta T, and you should be able to use that equation for this chapter. You should be able to explain these different things. Now, look, these are all essentially just new vocab words or new vocabulary ideas here. Enthalpy change, enthalpy of reaction, enthalpy of formation, enthalpy of combustion. And then lastly, you need to be able to solve problems for all of those enthalpies that we talked about above, right? So you can see, again, there's a lot of material in this section 16.1. So let's start with what is thermochemistry. Well, thermochemistry is the study of the transfers of energy as heat that accompany chemical reactions and physical changes, right? So in thermochemistry, we are concerned with the heat energy that is being transferred as a result of these chemical reactions. How are we going to go ahead and measure this? We could measure it using a calorimeter. If we were in class, we would build little calorimeters out of styrofoam cups, and we would then use them to measure how much heat was transferred, the temperature changes, and some reactions. Really, for a calorimeter, all you need is something that's going to, like it says down here, have a sealed reaction chamber that is immersed in some known quantity of water. Well, why do we have to have it in the water? The energy that is given off by our reaction inside our little reaction chamber is then going to be absorbed by the water, and we can measure how much energy is absorbed because the temperature is going to change, right? So from that temperature change, we can then calculate how much energy was actually given off. So again, I want to make sure you guys are picturing this, and I've got some good videos for you. But basically, it's just a little chamber. So, you know, we could have like a styrofoam cup, and that could be the reaction chamber sitting inside some water, and then the water would then change temperatures as the reaction went forward. What is temperature? Temperature is a measure of the average kinetic energy of particles. We've already spoken about the greater the kinetic energy, then the hotter something is going to be, or the greater the kinetic energy of something, the more temperature it will have. And here's our equation for converting Celsius into Kelvin. It's pretty easy. You're going to take your Celsius and then just add 273.15 to whatever number Celsius you have. So if it's 10 degrees Celsius, then we would say that that's 283.15 Kelvin. Cool. So that's a pretty easy one, but you do definitely need to make sure you understand how to convert from Celsius to Kelvin. Okay, so then we can get into heat transfer, right? So the amount of energy that is transferred as heat is measured in joules. So joules is our SI unit there for heat. Well, any energy really. Heat can be thought of as energy that is transferred between 2 samples of matter because of a difference in their temperature. And we know that it's always going to move from high temperature to low temperature, right? That's how energy will always move. Cool. So again, joule is our SI unit there. So now we get to the idea of specific heat, okay? So specific heat basically is just pointing out that every different substance will be able to transfer different amounts of heat, right? It'll have a different heat capacity we could talk about here, right? And so that's what this specific heat is talking about. So I would draw your attention to this second bullet here. The specific heat of a substance is the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of 1 gram by 1 degree Celsius or 1 Kelvin, okay? And then we measure the temperature difference in Celsius or Kelvin. It's the same. So this is basically trying to point out that like copper will have a different specific heat than iron, right? So it'll be able to absorb or release different amounts of energy. And that's where the specific heat comes in. Okay, so again, the definition here, the second bullet is what's most important. Specific heat is the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of whatever substance by 1 degree Celsius. Oops. Sorry. Values for specific heat, you could have it as joules per gram per Celsius degree or joules per gram per Kelvin degree, right? Either of those are fine. You can see there's the units for you. Here are some some molar heat capacities for various things. So this is telling us that this is the amount of energy required to heat 1 mole 1 degree, right? And so there you can see like aluminum compared to aluminum chloride. Well, we can see that the aluminum chloride has a much higher molar heat capacity, right? And so it's going to be able to absorb heat more readily than the aluminum will. Here is our specific heat calculation. Remember, I said that the equation is going to be Q equals mc delta T, but look, you could easily go ahead and just identify the specific heat. That's the C part here, right? And so you could go ahead and just rearrange that equation so that you've got C out front. So this is how you would solve for just specific heat, right? And in this case, you would be given Q, the energy, M, the mass, and delta T, the change in temperatures. Cool? You can rearrange that equation to solve for any of the other parts, right? And there is our Q equals, they put C first, but I've always learned it with M first. So Q equals MC delta T, or Q equals CM delta T. There it is. Think about it. You could rearrange this equation to solve for the M. You could rearrange this equation to solve for the delta T, right? Any of those would be possible as long as you have the other three. And so you guys know that on my test, you're going to be given 3 of these 4 variables and asked to find the 4th, right? That's what we'll do for these types of problems. And here is a sample problem. Now, like always, guys, I'm just going to zoom through this sample problem, but I'm just saying, like normal, it gives you everything you need. It gives you the answers along the way. So I would really encourage you to try these sample problems. So I'm just going back and showing you, this is probably a good call. You should do this little problem. It won't take you very long. And like I said, the answers are provided. So there's an answer. There's the final answer, right? So you've got all the answers there. You should be able to see exactly how they've done that work, and that should be helpful. Let's talk about enthalpy real quick. So enthalpy, we can see enthalpy is going to be represented by delta H. Okay, H is the symbol for enthalpy, so delta H would be change in enthalpy. Only changes in enthalpy can be measured. Delta H is measured as the change in enthalpy. And an enthalpy change, what are we actually talking about? We're talking about the amount of energy that is absorbed by a system as heat during some sort of process at a constant pressure. Okay, so how much heat is absorbed is our enthalpy change. Cool, so for enthalpy change, we're always, that delta H, that's always going to be the products, the enthalpy of the products minus the enthalpy of the reactants, right? And that's how we're going to determine what our enthalpy change is. Anything that releases energy, I would hope you guys know these terms a little bit, but if not, we're going to learn them. Anything that releases energy is going to be exothermic. That would mean that the energy of the products is less than the products of the reactants, right? So here's an example. Oops, sorry. Here is, what's going on with my computer? It won't let me go back, guys, so I'm just going to continue on. There's our equation that we've got there, right? So this is telling us what? When hydrogen gas combines with oxygen gas, it's going to form water vapor or gaseous water, and it's going to release 483.6 kilojoules. Well, if it's releasing that energy, right, it says plus this is released on this side, that must be an exothermic reaction, right? This is an example of a thermochemical equation, right? And all the difference is there is that you can see the equation also includes the amount of energy that is released or absorbed. Cool. Yeah, this is all the other stuff's the exact same thing, right? A mole of hydrogen, a mole of oxygen. Oops. The quantity of energy that's released is going to be proportional to the quantity of reactants that form. That makes sense, right? So that means that if we double the number of moles, then we're going to get double the amount of energy, right? So here, producing twice as much water in the equation shown would require twice as many moles and thus would release twice as much energy, right? That makes sense. Endothermic reactions, however, are going to be a little different. Now notice in the endothermic reaction, so here's water breaking down into hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. Well, look, this time we put the plus 483 on this side, the reactant side of the equation. And what does that signify? That tells us that to break apart this water, we need to add 483.6 kilojoules to the system, and that will allow the reaction to proceed forward. Cool. Physical states always have to be included in these, right? Because the states of the reactants are going to influence the overall energy, right? So if this was like solid water here, then obviously we would require additional energy to get it to go ahead and break apart into its component parts. Does that make sense? Or even if it was liquid water here, that would also require additional energy to get it to break apart. Does that make sense? That's all we're trying to say there is the physical states are quite important. I'm going to keep on going here. Usually written by delta H value rather than writing the energy as a reactant or a product. Yeah, this is much more common down here. For an exothermic reaction, it's going to be negative because the energy was losing that energy, right? For exothermic. And then endothermic, it's going to have a positive number over here. This is really much more common to see the equation written on the side and then the change in enthalpy off to the side as a delta H value. Okay, so that's all this is saying. And again, remember, a negative value here would say that the overall system was losing that much heat, which would make it exothermic. If it was a positive value, it would be gaining that much heat, and that would be endothermic. Here's a graph that's just showing you what's going on for the energy profile for a exothermic reaction. So notice in this case, the reactants had significantly more energy than the products do. So that's telling us that our delta H must be a negative value. Thus, this must be an exothermic reaction. Here's the reverse, right? There's an endothermic reaction pathway. And here you can see that there is significantly more energy in the products than there were in the reactants. Thus, the delta H is positive. Thus, this is an endothermic reaction. Now that brings us to enthalpy of formation. And so you can see here, this is the enthalpy change that happens when a mole of a compound is formed from its elements at the standard state of 1 atmosphere and 25 degrees Celsius. Cool. Usually these are going to be given at standard temperature and pressure, so that the comparisons between the things are going to be meaningful, because we know that if we're at a different temperature, right, or a different pressure, that's going to slightly change how much energy is required or what the enthalpy change is when elements are formed or things are formed. Cool. To signify standard states, we're going to use that not symbol, right? So you can see here, like down below in this orange delta H F naught. Well, what's that saying? That's the change, that's the delta, of the enthalpy, enthalpy is the H, of formation, that's the F, at standard states. That's that little knot. Okay, so I know that looks like a really complex little series of symbols and things, but it's not really, right? Delta H F naught is just saying the change in the enthalpy of formation at standard state. Yeah, in the appendix of your book is where you'll find these. Usually that'll be given to you. If I ask you to do anything with enthalpy of formation, I'll give the values to you on the test, right? Notice that it's always talking about 1 mole, right? So if I give you a chart that says here's the enthalpy of formations, it's always talking about 1 mole, even if it doesn't say 1 mole specifically. Yeah, and that information should be included in the thermochemical equation, right? So let's see here. Compounds that have a very large enthalpy of formation are very stable, right? So here we have this delta H F naught of carbon dioxide is negative 393.5 kilojoules. Well, that's pretty good, right? Standard state would have 0. And this would then indicate that the carbon dioxide was more stable than the elements it formed from, because look, it's given off a bunch of energy, right? It's released a bunch of energy. So it must be more stable, otherwise it wouldn't release it. Yeah, so positive value usually means it's unstable. So something like hydrogen iodine has a plus 26.5 kilojoule per mole delta H for formation. And so what's that telling us? That's telling us that that doesn't want to stay as HI, right? It wants to move to something else. So it's going to require energy to quickly go ahead and just break it down into a more stable situation with the decomposed iodine vapor and hydrogen gas. Cool, so I'm just trying to point out that this delta H F naught number can tell you some things about the chemicals. Here's enthalpy of combustion. You can guess that it is exactly what it sounds like, right? This is the energy change that takes place when something combusts. Again, it's talking about 1 mole of reactants, right? And we've talked previously about in enthalpy of formation where there was 1 mole of product being formed. Well, this is 1 mole of reactant for combustion. And usually it's going to be subscripted with this C, right? So you saw before it was delta H